Hello, I'm Jim Cornwall, and this is the WalkingPost.com podcast. WalkingPost.com is the news website dedicated to walking, with all the latest on fitness, gear, books, health, events, trails, festivals, and more. This podcast is number 33, and it's going out on October the 31st, and we all know what day that is. It's actually a day when people walk more than usual so that they can get candy and then take in 15 times the number of calories that they just walked off. Although having said that, I'm one to talk as I didn't really get any walking in this week. The one day that it was fine, it was really windy. The last time we went out and tried to film when it was windy, even with microphone windshields, it sounded like we were in the eye of a hurricane. Because it's Halloween, we put together some appropriately named places that you could go walking, if you had the budget to go to all of these places, that is. So let's start with Skeleton Coast, and that's in Namibia, which would actually be a great place to go hiking. Next one is Pumpkin Hollow in Oklahoma. There are quite a lot of places with pumpkin in them, but I had to choose just one. Next is Bat Cave, North Carolina. And I actually did know about this place because a musician friend of mine lives there. Whenever I'd call him at the end of the call, he'd always say, "To the Batcave." Next, it's a street that you can walk down, and it is called Vampire Avenue, and it is in Newton in Nottinghamshire. I've no idea why it's called that because none of the other streets nearby have similar names. Where I grew up, all of these street names were places in the southwest, and again, no idea why. Next is a bit closer to where I live, and that is Cauldron Linn on the River Devon in Scotland. And Linn means waterfall here. And Robert Burns went there. Actually, every single place that he went seems to cling to the association, but then I guess that's only natural. Another place that I have been to, literally, is hell. There's a town in Michigan called Frankenmuth, which sounds a bit ghostly itself, but it's where many people go because it's a pretty German-style place, and there's a huge year-round Christmas store there. So once in a while when I lived in Ontario, we'd pop over to Michigan and go to Frankenmuth. And on the way back and on the way there, you would go through the small community of hell. So I've been to hell, and I've also been to hell and back. Last week we talked about Australian beaches, and there's one in South Australia called Coffin Bay. There's Apparition Hill in Bosnia, although that has a religious connotation. And then it's back to Ontario in Canada, to Creepy Lake, although I've not been there. And last but not least, for our top 10 places with a Halloween theme, is Spider Creek in New Zealand. On last week's podcast, we had a conversation with Greg Keeney, who walked the entire 1,000-mile coast of New South Wales in Australia. This week, we're talking about something that connects to that, and that is the psychology of long-distance walking. Before we do get going, though, if you do have news, guest ideas, or even subjects to cover, or comments, or if you want to advertise, please do get in touch via walkingpost.com or just email me at jim@walkingpost.com. I was about to say you can email me about anything, but then that includes spam, and I get enough of those already. Okay, let's go through some of the headlines of the news articles you may have missed that we had on walkingpost.com this past week. Haglofs and Twice Me introduced digital safety technology to winter apparel, which is a great idea. A Canadian startup has launched a wearable that it says makes walking easier, and in England a footpath that was approved 21 years ago is finally a footpath. There's a new and improved Arran Trail, but not on the Scottish island of Arran, it's in Blackburn, Lancashire. And I added that because there's a Blackburn in Scotland as well. The Salt Marsh Walking Festival was a hit. A new hiking guide to 5 Washington state parks has been published. And there is going to be a Stickman Winter Trail in 25 English forests. A section of the Taff Trail in Wales is closing for key work, and you can read all of these and many more at www.walkingpost.com. This week, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, something a little different. We've had a few guests on who have either done very challenging walks, like Greg last week, or who have mentioned challenging walks and conditions. So I thought it might be interesting to talk about long-distance walking from the psychological perspective. Why are more people doing big hikes, and how do you prepare? What are the dangers? How do you know when to give up? To answer these questions, we had a great conversation with psychologist Vladimir Novkov in Bulgaria. He's also the founder of the company sportpersonalities.com, where he looks at the different kinds of traits involved in sports. Could you maybe give me a bit of background on what it is you do and the kind of experiences that you have in health, fitness, walking?
I am Vladimir Novkov. I am from Bulgaria, and I'm a social and sports psychologist and performance coach. And my work is mostly focused on how personality shapes motivation, consistency, recovery. And in my work, I try to blend psychology and physiology, so mind and body. I usually work with athletes and performers, but in my free time, I also do trail running. So I'm used to walking and suffering a lot. And I also consult people who take part in Bulgaria's longest trails, like the Vitusha 100, which is 100 kilometers around the mountain that is near Sofia, the capital city. Pirin 160, which is one of maybe the most grueling race in the country.
I think that in the last few years, more people seem to be taking on bigger and bigger challenges. You used to see people do maybe 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, but now people are doing the Appalachian Trail or the Camino de Santiago.
Yeah.
Why do you think that people are going on more of these longer, more challenging routes?
One thing that I noticed through the years is that first it was the marathon. It was the defining distance. I mean, if you run a marathon, then you could call yourself a runner, long distance runner. And then gradually, at least in Bulgaria, I noticed that people started to up the distance. And now we're talking about 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers. And I think the main appeal in this is modern life is quite stimulated, even overstimulated. The way I see it, people are seeking this kind of deceleration and the sense of presence that comes with walking. You know, for example, there are many meditations in Eastern philosophy that involve walking. So walking is one of the way to achieve this a little bit of disconnection with modern life, so to speak. There is also the kind of people who are seeking their identity, their purpose, their connection with nature or with other like-minded people. And one thing that I noticed maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, many people who are motivated by external things like fastest known times, something that hasn't been done before. For people are starting to do these things not only from the inside, from their intrinsic motivation, we call it in psychology, but for performance and for recognition and for awards even.
You mentioned recognition there, and I was just thinking as you were talking about that, is there maybe a social media impact on that people want to show off what they're doing, or they're thinking, well, I want to put something on YouTube or Instagram, I'll do a big long distance hike and I can show people what I do?
Absolutely. And think about this, if you are living in a world without social media and you're the person who can walk from your village, which is 50 kilometers away from the other village, you are going to be the long walker of the region. But with the presence of social media, you see thousands of people who do this. And this creates both a sense of companionship, a sense of belonging, that you belong to this larger tribe, which is not only in your country, but throughout the world. But it also creates a type of attention. That means that you are not the only one. And if you want to be present in social media, you have to up the ante all the time. So I guess this is also an element of why the distance keeps increasing and keeps increasing.
Do you think that the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, had any impact? Because lots of people seem to start walking around that time, although I can't say that everybody kept going with it, but it did seem to make more walkers.
You know what they say, you only appreciate a thing when it is taken from you. And I guess that people who during the pandemic suddenly realized that walking and having free access to everywhere is not a given. And you could see that there were many, actually the sport and the activity that was that saw the greatest increase for me was backyard ultras. So during the pandemic, there were people who were doing marathons in their backyards. There were people who were climbing up the stairs for the distance of Mount Everest, for example. These are all interesting challenges because people, and these challenges happen because people need to move. So this is something that is inherent, but you don't realize it until you are deprived of it for some reason or another.
That was the pandemic, but it kind of extends to now. Are people taking on bigger challenges for the mental aspect of it or the health benefits, or is it a combination?
I think it's both. At least from my experience, most people go into running or hiking or walking for the health benefits. So they know that, or they've read that this is something useful, that this is a sport that is easy to get into. You literally grab your sneakers and go out and take a run. But once you start to realize that there are many mental benefits to walking and to running, and people often stay there because they find their meaning there. I don't think that you continue to run just because it is healthy. You continue to run or you continue to walk or to hike because this fulfills some kind of need that you have. In psychology, there is something that is called self-determination theory, which means that people are seeking to do things that satisfy their autonomy, so they have the choice to do it, their competence, which means that they want to master new things. In case of hiking and walking and running, these are new limits, new terrains, as we said in the beginning, increasing distance, increasing pace, etc. And then you need relatedness, so you need a community. Even if you run alone, with the help of social media, you are not running alone anymore. You have Strava, you have Instagram, and even if you want to share something, you can do it much easier than before.
And I guess there's also apps now where you can pretend that you're running in Egypt, or, there's all
Yeah,
kinds of different things that you can use to help motivate yourself, I guess.
yeah. Since I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, Google absolutely knows that I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, so I constantly get these run to Mount Doom with Frodo and get a medal, etc. I never bought one. I don't know how they function exactly, but it's a very interesting concept. And this is again because there are people who are very intrinsically motivated. So they are motivated just by idea of running. And I think that up until some years ago, the world of hiking and ultra distance running was populated mostly by people like this. At least in Bulgaria, there were not so many organized events. Most events were organized by a few friends who just said, we're going to run around the Balkan mountains and sleep in the huts or sleep in tents, etc. And with the increase in popularity, as with all niche hobbies, many people outside from the sport are starting to look into it. And I personally think that this is something great, because long distance running is a form of meditation, and I personally believe that we need more meditation in our lives.
Do you think people are underestimating the psychological challenges of taking on something that, if in Scotland, if the signposts aren't good and you're doing 1,000-mile walk, you can get discouraged or lost, and there's more of it's more difficult.
Absolutely, because when you say walking 1,000 miles, many people, probably all of them, automatically start to think that this is going to be an endurance event for your legs, for your body, for your heart. And this is true. But many don't realize the psychological toll that such a distance takes on your psyche, on your mental and cognitive ability. Because with each day of running or hiking for a marathon, for example, these things start to compound. And in the same way that it compounds physically, it starts to compound mentally as well. So you will get emotional fluctuations. You have euphoric episode, but then they will be followed by some despair. Sometimes even a small rain can feel like a blizzard, and you will be ready to give up. And it's very important before embarking on such a challenge to carefully think about the things that can go wrong. This is a crucial part of all visualizations. For example, when athletes visualize their success, they also have to visualize their mental and internal struggles. And then it becomes much easier for them to say, oh, I know that I'm going to be desperate at some point, but I've thought about it, I've prepared about it mentally and physically, and so it will be much easier for me to cope with this.
Do you think that people plan enough? And I'm not talking about the mental and physical aspects of it, but do you think that people, and just as an example, when we lived in Canada and the US, you would see people going on fairly long, not long distance trails, but, maybe 20, 30 kilometers, completely unprepared. Do you think that people prepare enough just for what they're doing?
Well, they should be, because nature is unforgiving when you're not prepared. If you get lost in a city, you will find a way to come home, and you are still in civilization. There are other peoples around you, but if this happens in the wilderness and you are not prepared, you are now in a life or death situation. So I think that careful preparation, and you probably know it very well, but careful preparation is a key thing. What I am saying is that mental preparation should go hand in hand with physical preparation. And they go hand in hand because, for example, if you don't sleep well one of the nights before the next day of marathon hiking, then you should be prepared that your mental abilities will be lower. But if you've thought about this before embarking on the journey, it will be easier to cope, because it won't be something that comes out of nowhere and surprises you and adds to the mental load that is this ultra running event, for example.
And even temperature extremes can cause your mind to not work properly.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's because if you take the UTMB, for example, where people run 170 kilometers, I've seen some videos of athletes who did this, who said that they don't really know when they are ready to give up, or they should give up. And sometimes this comes back and haunts them in the late stages of the race. So there are some people in the checkpoints who watch exactly for these kinds of signs that this athlete is done, but he or she doesn't know it yet. Yeah, the problem when you are doing a single hike is that you don't have a team of people to tell you you are done. So you have to be well prepared to know when you are done, both physically and mentally.
Right. And how would you recommend people prepare themselves mentally? Obviously, physically, you can build up to it. You can walk shorter distances so that you're fitter for the challenge. But how would you recommend people approach that mental side of maybe they're going to be away for a month, 2 months, just walking every day?
It's very similar to preparing for the physical part. First, you should do a very honest assessment of your mental abilities to cope with a month-long walking challenge. So you can sit down and write, this is the areas where I will have troubles. These are the areas that I can excel, and how the areas of my mental abilities where I excel can help me cope with the areas that can become challenging for me. Next, you should be prepared for what to expect. So you can expect boredom, loneliness, there will be frustration. When you visualize those things, you don't just visualize the end of the 30th day. You visualize how you're feeling in the worst scenario of heavy rain on the 5th day or the 10th day. So something else that you have to be very honest with yourself is, why do you do it? Does this desire to do this challenge come from the inside, or it comes from some kind of desire for success, for recognition? And there is nothing wrong in desiring to do this for recognition or success. But if you pretend that you're doing it just for internal rewards while expecting something external, this can lead to frustration. So people should just be very honest with themselves. And then we come to micro goals. Just like building up the physical endurance, you can build up the mental endurance. Go out and take a walk, a short walk, underdressed in rain or in snow. So be more prepared both physically and mentally than what you expect to find on the trail, but in a controlled environment.
And I guess there's the connection between the physical and mental as well, because after walking for 5 or 10 days, most people have aching feet or blisters or aching muscles, or there's some kind of physical aspect that then affects the mental aspect as well.
Absolutely. And this is the time to ask yourself, is this something that I have prepared for? Can I cope with it? And there is a saying when we hike for a long time in Bulgaria, let's go to the next pole. There are poles in Bulgaria, huge, that mark the winter trails. So it's let's go to the next pole and decide from there. But don't do it because you just want to continue. But honestly, when you get to the next pole, assess the situation and decide, am I done? Should I just go to the next hut and be done with it? Or I can continue. Or I can go to the next hut and reassess. So it's a part of a mental negotiation with yourself.
Do you think that it's wise to, I mean, there's so much on YouTube now in terms of people helping you, and there are options, people like yourself. Do you think that people should be taking advice from professionals like you when they're doing something that they maybe have never done before?
If they feel that they can't cope alone, usually the role of psychologists and professionals is just that. If you feel that you can't cope alone, or you know that you can't cope alone, this is the time for a professional to help you and to serve as a mirror of your thoughts. I very much like this metaphor for psychology in particular, because you are not doing the thinking for the person. You are not doing the walking, but you can help them understand the way they think about thinking. We call this metacognition. You can help them understand the way they think, extrapolate from that, and decide which aspects of their mentality can help them achieve the goal that they have set up to do.
You mentioned that Bulgarian phrase about going to the next pole. I've talked to quite a few people, hikers and mountaineers, who I talked to a mountaineer who had got to within 20 meters of the summit of Mont Blanc and gave up because he felt that it was dangerous to continue. A lot of people in that situation would just say, well, I'm only 20 meters from the top, I'm going to make it. Is it important to know when to give up and how to approach that?
Absolutely. This is a very common story in mountaineering. There was a very famous Bulgarian climber, Bojan Petrov. He died several years ago under Shishapangma when he was trying to ascend. But he said once that he turned back just 100 meters before the peak. I think it was K2. Just because he knew that he won't have enough power and strength to come down. So especially in mountaineering, but also in ultra hiking, I always advise to ask yourself, can I go back to where I started? So if I can go back, this means that this should give me a very clear idea that I'm getting too tired. Because if you can't go back, then you have a problem.
And I think people often get themselves into situations that it might be the case that you've done 100 miles, but it's all been flat. And as soon as you take on something like the Camino de Santiago, where there are hills, you're introducing something that maybe you're not used to. And just an unusual situation can tire you both physically and mentally, I guess.
When I plan races, both for myself and other people, I always include the altitude in the total distance. So there is a very neat formula that each 100 meters of elevation equals 1 kilometer flat. So if you are doing a 100-mile race, but you have to climb 11,000 meters, like the UTMB, for example, you are actually doing a 270-kilometer race. And this is something that you definitely should take into account.
Yeah. And again, it's not just the physical. You have to bear in mind the fact that you're going to need energy from whether it's drinks or food. And descending can sometimes be as much of a challenge as ascending because you're putting stress on your knees, and often the temptation is to go faster than you maybe want to go.
Yeah, but by the way, one of the things that I've heard athletes say was, I expected the downhill to be easier because you've been climbing this mountain. You expect it to be difficult because you see the ascent. But when the downhill comes, it's either too technical or your feet are too tired. And this compounds to the mental load because now you are in some kind of cognitive dissonance. So you expected this to be easier, and it turns out that it is much harder than you expected. And this leads to a huge fall in motivation. While if you are prepared that I will be just as slow on descents that I am on ascents, then you might be even pleasantly surprised when you are faster.
And I think that when you're tired, that's when your decision-making ability gets affected and you are more prone to making mistakes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is where the preparation comes into action. Because when you have a clear plan, for example, like in the mountaineering, if I am not at the peak at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I turn back no matter where I am. No matter if I'm 100 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters, whatever, I turn back. And it is very important, and this is now a personal thing, to be ready to not finish at all costs. To finish only if this fulfills your initial plan. And you have to remind yourself that this is the plan that I made when I was not tired, when I was in my best mental capacity, and I'm now not in my best mental capacity. So I'm going to listen to the person who did this for me a month ago or several days ago, because this person, my previous identity, had my best interest in mind. And I am now not capable of going after my best interest or finding out my best interests.
Do you think that people should be making adjustments as they walk? Just what you were saying, the fact that on a good day, maybe you get where you want to at 2 o'clock, but on a bad day, or if there's been a slip of land or it's muddy, so you go a different way, should you constantly be changing your plans as you go?
Especially for something that long as ultra walking and running, that sticking to the plan is more important. Yes, you can do some changes, but for example, if you arrive earlier someday, it is much better, at least in my opinion, to take the time to recover, to reassess, to get into a better mental state, and to continue with the plan on the next day. Because you don't know what the next day will bring. You don't know that if you decide to go to the next hut or to the next checkpoint, that you won't be even more tired for the day after today. And when you're more tired, you are prone to making worse decisions. And if this day happens to not be so good day, then you are faced with the tiredness from yesterday, together with the mental load of the current day.
Should you be saying to yourself, well, I thought I was going to be there by 4 o'clock, and it doesn't look like I'm going to get there till 6 o'clock. You know, do you have to keep making those kind of decisions as you go as to, well, maybe I should stop here because I'm not going to make it that far, or rather than sticking rigidly to that plan if you feel like you're in trouble or whatever?
Well, in the ideal case scenario, of course, you have to reassess your situation. The problem is that ultra running and hiking are not ideal case scenarios. You are not like a sprinter who is there to do a 10-second sprint that they have prepared for an entire year. You are in the situation, and you have to be very honest and careful with your decisions. Something that people can do is have a very clear idea of when they are capable to make these decisions. Sometimes even having some complex mathematical problem in their minds that they can usually solve, but now they can't. This is a very clear indication that their cognitive ability has diminished. And if you know that your cognitive ability is diminished, then you have to fall back on your plan that you have made when your cognitive ability was in the best place.
You were talking about you work with a lot of runners. Do you work with walkers as well? I mean, are they coming to you for advice?
Mostly with people who do ultra running events. Sometimes people who do multi-day events, but mostly events that span 1 or 2 days or a night, for example.
All right. Are there lots of those in Bulgaria?
Yeah.
Um,
We have a growing ultra running community here.
that seems to be something that has taken off massively in the last few years. I know when I did an interview with somebody in Hong Kong, they were saying that not only are there more of them, they're always looking for new challenges and more difficult challenges. So that must be tough as well to be able to provide that kind of challenge for them.
Absolutely. The organizers, at least in Bulgaria, there are always new races. Right now, the existing races are not upping their difficulty too much, but there are always new ones. For example, there are more vertical kilometers. There are more sky running events that focus just on the sky running distance. There are 2 or 3 very large 100 milers. So for a small country, we are 6-7 million people. We have lots of events.
Are there any dangers associated with constantly increasing the difficulty, or do people kind of know, oh, well, that's one that I don't want to do because it's kind of out of my scope?
More difficult races have some kinds of restraints and conditions for going into them. For example, there is a very famous event called Pirin Extreme, which is a 38-kilometer that moves the ridge of the Pirin Mountains, which are almost alpine terrain. So it's very difficult. And you have to prove that you can run this kind of distance and that you have run other races like this to be allowed to be entered there. So it's up to the organizers to set some permissions and conditions for entry.
Is awareness greater than it used to be, though? I know we talk about a completely different sport, but in football, where we're now more aware of the fact that heading the football can cause neurodegenerative diseases, are we getting more aware of the dangers of some of these long distance pursuits?
Up until this year, at least in Bulgaria, we were in this romantic phase when we thought that nothing can go wrong. But we had, unfortunately, 2 death cases in races this year. So people are starting to get more and more careful, medical examinations before races, imposing more restraints. So yeah, I think that we are moving beyond this romantic period when we think that nothing bad can happen, because let's face it, these are mountains, these are very long distances, and bad things can happen.
Right. And it also puts pressures on the rescue services. I know in Scotland every year there are people dying, and also people that are days on their own just because they go out in conditions that they really shouldn't be out there.
Absolutely. And in Bulgaria, up until this year, we didn't have medical helicopters. So the rescue services had to do everything by feet and by hands. And when you have to rescue someone from the mountain, that you can imagine how difficult it is.
With a lot of the long distance trails, because more people are doing long distance trails, they've improved the marking. So whereas it might have been in the past, it might have been every 1.5 kilometers that you see, okay, there's the red sign, I know I'm going in the right direction, that they've been going out and adding more signage so that people don't get lost or end up in the wrong place. So I guess that's another good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. At least here in Bulgaria, the most popular routes are very well marked. We have probably markings every 30 meters or 50 meters. So if you're following the trail in the national parks, you're very unlikely to get lost. Now, if you move to some of the smaller mountains, some of the mountains that are not so famous, you might have more troubles. But in the most popular one, like Riva, Pirin, the Balkan Mountains, it's very unlikely to get lost.
Are there some really good long distance trails in Bulgaria?
We have one that is, I call it the Bulgarian Camino, which is moving along the Balkan Mountains, the mountain that splits Bulgaria in two. So you basically go from the westernmost part of Bulgaria to the sea, to the easternmost part. And it's very beautiful. It's called Kom Emine. Kom is the name of the peak. Emine is the name of the cape that you end on. And many people are doing it. There are efforts for fastest known time. Right now, the goal is to do it in less than 4 days. We're still waiting for this to happen. But most people take their time. They do it for 15, 20 days. There are also routes from Sofia to the eastern border. And this route moves along the highest mountains in Bulgaria, so it's very technical and very challenging.
A really enjoyable and informative chat there. And you can also go to sportpersonalities.com and you can check out what kind of sport personality you have. Are you an anchor or a soloist or a spark plug? I found out that I have no personality whatsoever. Another longer interview, so we will leave it there for today. It's yet another wet and wild weekend here, so it's either get wet or stay home, so I think it will be waterproof time. If you do have news or suggestions for podcast guests, please do get in touch through jim@walkingpost.com. If you are going out trick-or-treating, stay safe, or if you're driving, please be extra observant. My son decided this year at the tender age of 13, he's too old for this. Too old for something at 13. But when we did walk around the village with a group of other kids, it was astonishing how many people still couldn't be bothered to slow down, let alone stick to the 20 miles an hour speed limit. I'm sure they saved 8 seconds getting home by going 45 through the village with lots of little kids walking around. Of course, if you're not listening to this on the day that it was published, that's fine too. You can ignore all the Halloween talk, especially if you end up listening to this at Easter. So I hope you enjoyed this week's WalkingPost.com podcast, and I hope you have a great week, hopefully with some nice autumn or fall colours, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere at least. So, until next time, happy trails! Walking Post from WalkingPost.com is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.